Hello, you whiskey warriors and indeed warriors, and welcome to another whiskey review with me, the Whiskey Novice. I'm still skinny dipping my way through distilleries who I've yet to review. It's a simple concept, really. I thought I had reviewed more distilleries than I had. Then I realised I hadn't reviewed them, and I've decided now to make a list, and I'm reviewing all of these distilleries that I haven't reviewed yet. And the reason why I'm making another point out of this, even though I've been doing it every week, well, not every week, but certainly most weeks, is because of Scapa. Why? Why, you may ask? Well, I'm going to tell you if you'll be quiet and listen to me. Scapa were one of, if not the distillery, that pretty much kicked off this series of reviews. This me, diving into distilleries I haven't yet reviewed. Scapa, it was weird. Scapa seemed to be everywhere. Not everywhere, but just, they were certainly there. They were more there than they have been for a while, put it like that. I think that's the easiest way for me to explain it. I just remember Scapa always being that distillery that I always had on the long finger thing. I'll review it at some point. I will review Scapa at some point, and we're talking around the times of the sort of the Skirrin and the Peated Glansa were the two expressions on the market, and then they disappeared. Well, they did disappear because they've actually been discontinued. 2024, I think it was, that the Skirrin and the Glansa were both finally done away with. And it was just weird. They were one of those distilleries that there just seemed to be no end to getting their stuff. It wasn't like as if they had loads of stuff on the market, but there was never a concern about having a Scapa. I'll get there, was my attitude to it. And then whenever I went looking, they weren't there. It was bizarre. Especially, the fact that I had just always seen that Skirrin and Glansa sitting around forever. And then I knew there was a 16 and I knew there was a sort of 10, but when I came to get it, it wasn't to be found. Thankfully, and let's just take a look at this bottle. So the 10-year-old, let's look at Scapa, owned by the Chevis brothers. And established in 1885 originally, so we're going back a bit. They've been around a Highland distillery, but obviously on the Orkney Island, the second distillery for a long, long time, hanging around there with Highland Park. And Scapa were just that distillery that were there, but didn't. I would suggest that Highland Park were always talked about more than Scapa. And I knew and I know, I've spoken to people that Scapa have their fan base. But it was just, I just find it strange that they're not as talked about as specifically the likes of Highland Park. We tend to, I would almost argue that Scapa was overlooked. I managed to pick up, as I say, the 10-year-old even. I knew there was a 10, there's a 16, I think it was the 21 on the market, is pretty much the core range now. I knew the 10 was it was sort of available. It went off whenever this all kicked off. The 16 was another one. It went off the market a bit. It was just a wee bit harder to get my hands on. But just fate has it, whenever I started to look into it, the Scapa 10 came up. So I was able to pick up a bottle of it. 48%, a strange ABV, non-chill filtered. It doesn't say so on the bottle, but it does say so on the box. And colour, I'm not too sure. This is ex-bourbon. And it's ex-bourbon and virgin oak or something like that there. I remember reading it, but I'm sure you'll remind me. And I'm not going to try and even read what's in the small print here. It'll maybe come back to me later. I can smell this from the glass. It's from here. The fresh fruit. Also, and weirdly, and I don't remember getting this in my tasting notes, but I wasn't really staying this far away from it. Slight hints of overripe fruit, but oh yeah, it is fruity and oaky. And the deeper you get into it, the oakier it gets. But loads of fruit, citrus, lime, orange. Definitely. And I didn't realise, an apple, which I didn't notice before. And that's what's leaping out of the glass over that distance. Green apple, cooking apple. Apple pie. Oh yeah. I'm getting more out of this now than I did when I did my tasting notes. And it's bizarre how far away that is, that all of that, and it is apple pie. It's stewed apple and pastry. Light vanilla, yet again, brown sugar perhaps. Very, very pleasant, bright. And that, definitely that apple note. I had not picked that up whenever I was doing my tasting notes. And it's stewed apple. A very sort of slight effervescence, almost. That's beautiful. That's beautifully rich. It's got me wanting apple pie, apple tart. Fresh cream. Oh yeah. Sorry, I left you for a moment there. Let's get into the palate, shall we? Sweet sour. The apple, not so much. Caramel, now, yes. Sweet and sour rival. Caramel, thick, chewy. Solid as a rock. This is good. This is really good, solid whiskey. Easy whiskey. I'm going to say easy. I don't mean easy going. I mean easy whiskey, in that there's precious little to complain about here. So this is, you know, I literally could find nothing to complain about in this. Non-peated in this case. I was going to say obviously, but remember, it's not always. It's good, thick, fruity. Yeah, I like this a lot. As I said, the apple pie, not so much carrying through. And the problem, I always find that once your palate acclimates a little to the whiskey, that the nose, the joy of the nose, obviously turns, and I say obviously, but it tends to turn down a little, because all of that joy that you picked up originally, it's only natural that it sort of dies down a bit, because your palate has acclimated to what's on it. This is good stuff. Finish. Once again, I remember doing my tasting notes for this, and the finish is, I wouldn't suggest that it's totally different. It's better. It's a good long finish. Sort of citrusy white pepper, if that's a thing. Yeah, there's lots of lime. And it's not chili lime, it's just like a nice sort of clean white pepper and loads of lime in the finish. I like this a lot. I'm going to add a drop of water, just a drop, mind you, and we'll see what that does. Okay, I've added a drop of water, I've given it a bit of time, and it also come back to me. It is ex-American oak, so basically ex-bourbon, I would suggest. You know, give it a fancy name, ex-American oak. If you use the word ex in there, the term ex, that means it's been used for something else. Bourbon, generally, if you're talking American oak. Generally. You know, maybe I'm wrong, but much fruitier. It's fruitier again, but not so much the apple. If this was slightly oaky before, it's more now about the fruitiness, vanilla. That apple thing tends to sort of died down. I'm not convinced that water is a friend of this whiskey. It certainly worked better for me neat. Although the effervescence has become a little more pointed. It's not bad either way. It's not bad either way. And the same can be said for the palate. At 48%, it can cope with a drop of water. It really can, actually. Chocolatey notes, toffee. And the finish remains good. Here's what I'm going to say about this whiskey. Scapa, I mentioned at the start, a distillery that I'd never, ever really tried. I'd never been around Scapa. I don't know why. It literally just bypassed me. I remember whenever I was doing my tasting notes for this, thinking, if this were the only whiskey left in the world, I'd be quite happy. Honestly, I would. This is genuinely decent stuff, and it wasn't expensive. I mean, it's. I think I paid. Is it around the £40 mark? I'll probably remember that later, and if I'm wrong, I'll change that. It wasn't expensive. Anyway, I remember thinking 48% non-chill filtered. It's a bloody good nose. It's a bloody good palate. It works well, neat. It works well with a drop of water added. I mean, there's very, very little more you could ask of it. I also would even go as far as to say it's a nice bottle. I like the bottle shape. I like what Scapa have done with their redesign. They've stepped away from the sort of classic taller bottle into something a bit more squat, but with plenty of design. So yeah, I can't really fault this. Would I replace it? If I get it at the right price, actually, I will, yeah. So what would I offer up to you as an alternative? Well, before I do so, during the break, no prices, I said it before, it was actually, it's around 50 to 55 pounds. But even still, I think it was about the 50 I paid for it. At 50 pounds, 10-year-old malt, 48%, non-chill filtered, probably natural colour, I don't know. But would I replace? I will replace this if I get it for that price. I will, because I genuinely like this whiskey. I think Scapa have been overlooked if this is what they've been doing. So, and here I'm going to offer up my alternative for you. And you know, if you know me, you know what this whiskey means to me, and means to an awful lot of you. The Craigellachie 13. That's how highly I think of this Scapa 10 already. They are different, yes, but I mean that worm tub introduction, you know, the worm tub condensing in the Craigellachie, I always say adds that extra level of filth and thickness to it. Scapa aren't included in that. They're still shell and tube, or will be shell and tube, but there's a depth and thickness to this whiskey. It's the fact that when you add water to it, it stands up, it holds up and becomes something different. When I was doing my tasting notes, and I was going to say it's maybe done it, but it hasn't done it so much here. When I was doing my tasting notes for this, it's literally written on the box, non-chill filtered. That's as close as I could find to any sort of report on it as to whether it was chill filtered or not. When I was doing my tasting notes, I have a little checkbox of whether there's colour at it, whether there's, and literally for my own reference whenever I go back at a later date. And in this case, I'd put a question mark beside both of those because I wasn't sure. I don't know. When my glass was sitting with water in it, as I'd moved on to something else and I was moving around, and as I always do, I let it sit with water in it when I'm doing my tasting notes. It went cloudy. It went very cloudy. So at that point, I actually scored out the question mark and ticked non-chill filtered because it went so cloudy. It was a case of this, it's got to be non-chill filtered because it's doing the right things. Anyway, getting back, Craigellachie 13, solid as a rock whiskey. And I love it. So if you haven't tried Scapa 10, but you love Craigellachie 13, give Scapa 10 a go. give Scapa 10 a go. If you get it at the right price, it's a bloody good whiskey. So there you go. I'm going to leave it at that and say thank you very much for watching. It's always a pleasure to have you here. Thank you very, very much to my patrons. Should anybody wish to join that group and show the channel a little more support, the details are in the video description below. I'll be back next time, and I hope you can join me. Until then, look after yourselves. Here's to your good health. Cheers.
Hey, thanks for watching my video. Please click and subscribe to be notified of further content.